Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Before I get into this video, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like and comment on my video. Now, in the background of this video is gameplay by Bubblegum First and one of her fire teammates, Host ZA. Now, I will be going through the prelude to the story of Destiny, and they will continue through most of the story as I discuss it. So the prelude to Destiny 2, to Destiny actually as a whole. So this here comes from Destiny 2 story and relates to what happened to the light and the darkness in their original paracausal form. In their original paracausal form, their names were the gardener and the widower. The gardener had the duty of bringing the garden to life, and the widower had the duty of destroying all life within the garden. These weren't so much so as destructive and creation, they were just their natural flows, their natural forces. So, this is exactly where the darkness and the light form as part of the universe, and this is how they start their story. So, in the start, the darkness basically sorry. In the start, the darkness was actually this paracausal life form. The darkness was this paracausal life form called the widower, and the light was the gardener. Now, they had that constant flow and path that they always followed, and they eventually decided that they were going to play a game, the game of flowers. Now, the way it worked was the gardener would open a flower and the widower would close the flower, and they would have to try and keep going to make a pattern. And the widower always won in the sequence because the pattern always favored the end of the life at the end. So once he closed it, the life basically died and it couldn't be reopened by the gardener. Eventually, in frustration due to the constant sequence, the gardener kicked up a piece of dirt from the garden into a flower. And when he opened the flower remained open. But the widower couldn't close the flower, and this was the first time that the pattern had ever been altered. The widower was now upset with the fact that things weren't following the natural sequence, and the widower and the ga- gardener had decided that they should try and keep going at the game without following the exact same sequence. See if they can change up the sequence in any way possible and make sure that things change as they move through with the game. The widower was upset with this decision as it was a perversion to its natural order and got very upset with the gardener, and this began their combat. Now, the combat would never ever end because every time the gardener had the upper hand and almost defeated the widower, it would offer mercy. And this was the weakness of the gardener. It was naturally um, perverse to ending the situation. So every time the darkness felt that it was almost defeated, it would be favored by the light, the gardener, and this is exactly how things kept going. So it was in this constant flow and sequence that things happened when it came to combat. Eventually, their fighting destroyed the entire paracausal garden. This garden is before time and space, and within it was the tree of silver wings. And they end up destroying this tree, and from the ashes of the tree spawn the universe. So that is how basically they describe this whole situation starting. Now, once the ash hit the ground and began the universe, both the darkness and the light entered into the universe, and they definitely can never ever return to the garden. Now, when they entered into the universe, they started up their game with real civilizations as their flowers in this game. So the light became the traveler, the orb, and the darkness became the pyramid ships, and that is now their roles. The widower is the pyramids, the gardener is the light. Now, in the entire situation, we do not know if there were any other civilizations that they touched, but the first civilization that they touched were the Ammonite, that being by the traveler, and the Krell being the darkness. The Krell touched the worms touched the Krell, and the Krell became the first agents of the darkness who spread death to the universe. Now, the Ammonite were destroyed by the Krell, and the Ammonite were the ones touched by the light. When the Ammonite were destroyed, the traveler left their society and moved on to the next society. Now we know that this happened for many societies because of the tales from Oryx, Savathun, and Shivu Ra. In the original names, if I'm correct, it's Orash, Ashladun, and I'm forgetting the last name. I'm forgetting the last name of three sisters. Orash, Ashladun, and I'm forgetting the names, the last name totally. But anyway, they were the original Krall Osmium dynasty leaders, and they were the ones who made the first pact with the worm gods. And later, they made a pact which made them even greater to pervert their power even further, making them on the same level as the gods, the worm gods. And that's when Oryx became a direct agent of the darkness and received the power to take. So that is all going along the story of how Oryx became the Taken King, and that is before the prelude to the darkness reaching the Elixni. Now, once the darkness, not the darkness, sorry, once the traveler reached the Elixni. Now, when the traveler reached the Elixni people experienced a golden age similar to what Earth experienced, and then following it came the darkness. When the darkness arrived here, it destroyed the world and forced the traveler to leave. Now, when it arrived and destroyed the world, it is called the whirlwind to the Elixni people. So, all the fallen houses that we meet are members of the society who experienced the golden age and followed after the traveler when it went on to the next society. The next society that the traveler would grace with its presence was ours, the human society, and that is where the story actually begins to end the prelude. At this point here, the traveler has arrived at Earth, not at Earth, at Mars, and humans send over a mission to go and explore it. And at that point is where we actually get into Destiny for the first time when we watch our Destiny 1 first cutscene. So the humans send up a rocket with three different nations actually contributing towards it to go and see what this massive object on Mars was. And when they arrive, they find the traveler terraforming the environment so that it can now sustain life. And this was the first encounter with humanity and the traveler. From there, the traveler would grace the entire solar system, bringing life to places that we did not expect that life could be held on. And as this year went along, the traveler basically graced several planets and brought about Earth's golden age, allowing us to research and go to greater and greater technologies. Now, from this point, we then head on to the next piece of the story, which is the collapse. Now, the collapse occurred when the darkness arrived in our solar system. Now, when the darkness arrived, there are several major key situations that occur. The darkness and the light fight over a ship called the Yang Luwei, and within it is where all the Awoken were born because they decided not to be agents of the light anymore and not to take any side in the situation, asking for amnesty from the entire situation. The conflict between light and dark ended up opening a rift in time and space, sucking them into what would then become their space where they became the Awoken. And that will then lead up to the events in the future when the Awoken return to the solar system. The next thing which then occurs is the darkness destroys all of Earth's golden age technology and golden age sites. And from there, the next thing that happens is sorry about this, I'm just getting a little bit confused. The next thing that happens is the attacks on Titan and the attack with the darkness facing off against the light. And this is basically where everyone says the world ended, because at that point is where the traveler was actually crippled and the darkness was defeated. So this is the entire point of the story that we reached with the light and dark. And the darkness was actually defeated at this point and driven out of our solar system. And that is where the war ends, with the traveler totally injured and crippled, unable to move or do anything anymore. Within its dying breath, before it was totally unable to move, it gave out the ghosts. And our story begins from there. That will be covered in my next video. Thank you all for watching. Have a good day.